Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, is facing increased pressure to stand down over his handling of a child abuse scandal.
An independent report exposed his failure to act on allegations involving barrister John Smith, who's been one of the Church's most prolific abusers.
Well, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, refused to back the Archbishop of Canterbury, stating that the issue was actually a matter for the Church.
Director of Affinity Gospel Churches in Partnership, Graham Nichols, joins us now. So, who's to take responsibility for this, Graham?
Well, I think, as in lots of organisations, the man at the top needs to seriously consider whether he should take responsibility. I think the evidence is mounting that there was knowledge that Justin Welby personally had over a decade ago and probably didn't act fast enough or go far enough. And it also seems, just particularly in the last few days, but leading up to this, that he's lost the confidence of lots of clergy and people actually from different parts of the church, more from kind of my side of the church, the evangelical wing. There's a loss of confidence, but also it's kind of right across the church. So I think there's lots of reasons. I mean, at a personal level, he was not guilty of abuse. So we need to make that really clear. And, I'm sure feels a degree of sort of injustice himself. But the main issue here is there are victims, survivors who were abused, that they won't get justice in the sense of the perpetrator being brought to justice. But I think they need to have a sense that the church really takes responsibility for that. So it's a very serious matter. And I think it is probably a matter where he needs to consider his position, yeah.
He reportedly was considering his position when this report came out last week, which basically decided that he, hadn't really followed up properly and rigorously enough about these reports in 2013. There's no suggestion that he was involved in a cover-up, that he simply didn't look into it and follow up, and perhaps he could have stopped some of that abuse had he acted more swiftly. What's your own view? Because there is also a school of thought that this is a man who has enemies within the General Synod, not least over the toxic issue within the church of gay marriage, and also on his outspoken opinions on Rwanda as well. Could there perhaps be moves, people wanting his job?
Well, none of that counts. What counts is the protection of these children. And if he fails to act on that front, then he is as guilty as sin.
Well, yeah, and obviously they can't be protected now in that sense. But I think it's owning it is the point. It's not as good as perhaps it could be because the perpetrator is not still alive. But there is a sense of corporate responsibility. I would not also agree with Justin Welby on many moral issues and theological issues. And I think there probably are other reasons why it would be good if he resigned for his kind of inconsistency to do with the Bible and the gospel and what the purpose of the Church of England is. So I'm being careful not to sort of jump on his grave, as it were, because I think you're right in the question. There are factions who, for all kinds of reasons, might want to get rid of him. But I think leaving that all aside, I think the evidence is mounting for a degree of responsibility from him and from others. I think also there's a whole cultural issue to think about, to say, what is the Church of England for? What is the Church of England about? Is there a culture of complacency, or has it just become a big political organisation that's kind of beyond accountability and has lost its way a bit?
And Dennis, I just wonder, have you got a view on this one and Welby's position?
Indeed, and if you go back to GBNews Thursday last, I said he should resign. It was about the last final story of David Lammy and all that rubbish there. And I said, look, this is infinitely more serious. Welby should resign. And I'm very glad by yesterday the BBC had caught up with me and GBNews.
Yeah. And why do you think he hasn't acted?
Look, all churches, I mean, the Catholic Church don't even go there, don't even go to my Catholic school where we were beaten. Punishment by the monks was something called pants down. You had to bend over and drop your underpants. And then they started beating you, it was not very pleasant. And then you now realise that was child abuse. I pulled up my pants and sort of didn't really feel very impressed by those priests ever again. But they protected the abbot there for a number of years. He was finally uncovered in Kosovo. And the British ambassador there told me when the police caught up with him, when he went down there, the ambassador as well, they found 300,000 euros there given to him by the Vatican, again, so he could live comfortably in a remote village in Kosovo. So all churches are up to their necks in this.
In the Church of England, Archbishops of Canterbury are sort of forced to retire at 70. So Justin Welby would be due to retire next year. Do you see a scenario whereby the man who crowned the king, buried the Queen, might be able to be given a dignified, premature retirement to try and clear all of this up? And would that be the correct way of dealing with it? Or do you think he ought to resign in a sort of, in a sort of shameful situation?
Well, he should take responsibility for the failure of his actions. That's all. Just take responsibility. What message does it send to any other cleric who might be tempted? I say no more than that. And in other churches too. Just read the Catholic press about what's going on in the Catholic Church when the head of the Church of England just ignores all this.
Yeah, to be clear, John Smith wasn't a cleric. He was a QC who was involved in Christian summer camps and involved in a number of...
QCs, you're so wonderful people,
I'm just saying, it's not, when you talk about other clerics being tempted, it wasn't anyone within the church who committed this horrendous abuse. Start, Claire, with the pressure that's mounting on the Archbishop of Canterbury. His position looks to be very much in the balance this morning, even though he issued a statement yesterday. I don't think that's shored up any support for him. Do you think he will go early?
I do.
To retire next year?
I do, and I think he must. I think he must for the state, or must for this Church of England. And, maybe there's no irony lost that Wolf Hall has just started again. So anyone that needs any historical content or context for the Church of England, it's all there in Hilary Mantel's books. But yes, I firmly believe that he has to leave. He was appointed in 2013, and he was seen as a businessman. He was in the oil industry, and he was purported to be able to navigate the streams of validity of same-sex marriage, the appointment of women bishops within the Church of England, and indeed steer the Church through some torrid times. But I think now he has to go because he sits on boards that procure and get a lot of money for safeguarding issues that he signs off on. But the biggest safeguarding of all, he's not been able to safeguard, and that is the lives of innocent young lads. He knew about Smith's abuse. He knew about it and did nothing. So therefore, in my view, he was actually complicit. Yep. And for those reasons, I think he has to go, because I don't think he can do his job with utmost honesty, holding the badge of morality and honour when he knew these depraved crimes went on.
Yeah, I mean, who can take moral lectures from somebody who has essentially been part of a cover-up, from what it seems? All the reports are saying he's been part of this cover-up. 2013, there was time to put this man behind bars. There was time for him to face justice. And we see so many of these stories these days with people getting away with the most heinous things, and nothing happens. They're always, unfortunately, passed away before justice can be served. And I just think this is a real lapse of judgment.
And apparently, as well, nothing can actually be done to redress it until he has gone.
I agree with you.
Interesting. 3 members of the General Synod have now started this petition, which from within the Church has already garnered
5,000.
7,000.
7,000 now
this morning.
Yeah. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, is facing increased pressure to stand down after his handling of a child abuse scandal, or maybe not his handling of it.
Well, an independent report exposed his failure to act on allegations involving the barrister John Smith, who has been one of the Church's most prolific abusers.
Current Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer refused to back the Archbishop of Canterbury, stating the issue was a matter for the Church. We're joined by our political correspondent Olivia Utley on this one. So, typical Starmer sort of tactic there, stand back, let somebody else take the rap for it. Why do you think he's not speaking about this directly and has a view on this?
Well, Justin Welby is in really hot water here. A bishop, a few senior members of the clergy of the Church of England and numerous victims of John Smith have now called on Justin Welby to resign. And it could well be that Keir Starmer just thinks that Justin Welby's tenure as Archbishop of Canterbury is simply not sustainable in the current state. Justin Welby said last week that he had seriously considered resigning over the matter, but had decided not to. That prompted a backlash, and that backlash only seems to be increasing. What exactly did Justin Welby do wrong? Well, there are two allegations, really. Firstly, in 1981, just after Welby had been made a priest, he was talking to another priest in Paris, and that priest told him, he said that one of the boys who had been under John Smith's care had said that he was really not a very nice man. Justin Welby didn't follow up on that at all. That might be excusable on its own. The issue is that then in 2013, when John Smith's abuse became public, when there was a referral to the governing body of the Church of England, and the abuse was actually reported to Justin Welby, Justin Welby doesn't seem to have been very curious about it at all. In fact, he doesn't really seem to have done anything at all. Now, that is even more remarkable given that Justin Welby has had a personal association with John Smith over the years. He's given money to John Smith's crowdfunding events for his fundraising missions in Zimbabwe. He said that he's given £40 or £50 on a few occasions. And yet, when this report of abuse came out in 2013, Welby did nothing at all. That meant that John Smith's abuse allegations just weren't investigated properly up until his death in 2018. So he died without ever being properly punished for those horrific abuses of 130 boys over a span of multiple decades. Whether the Archbishop of Canterbury's position is sustainable now really, really remains to be seen. It does feel very up in the air, and it could be that Keir Starmer simply doesn't want to sort of back the losing horse. It does seem a little strange to me that the Prime Minister hasn't given a view on this issue, but as you say, Eamon, it is quite typical of Keir Starmer. He likes to play pretty cautiously. He doesn't want to come down too hard on one side or the other. In fact, on assisted dying, similarly, he doesn't really seem to want to make his view concrete and public. It'll be really, really interesting to see how this matter plays out.
Indeed, it will, Olivia. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for the update.
We should make the point that the Archbishop of Canterbury has released a statement in relation to all of this. He says he recognises the courage of the victims, including those related to John Smith, who've come forward and had to relive their trauma through contributing to this review. He went on to say, I had no idea or suspicion of this abuse before 2013.
Nevertheless, the review is clear that I personally failed to ensure that after disclosure in 2013, the awful tragedy was energetically investigated. Since that time, the way in which the Church of England engages with victims and survivors has changed beyond recognition.